Many studies have looked at the impact of hard news information, the number crunching that is done when a company reports earnings and how that translates into share price. However, there are fewer studies on soft information, the words actually used by a press release to convey information to the market. A new study published by Elizabeth Demers. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are the Assistant Professor of Accounting and Control Area at INSEAD. You have a study called Soft Information in Earnings Announcement, News or Noise, showing that the soft information, the words used in press releases, can actually give very good indications to share price performance over the 60-day window after the earnings announcement. How many press releases were you analyzing?
We were analyzing over 20,000 corporate earnings announcements.
And what does your study show once you've analyzed 20,000 corporate earnings announcements?
What it shows is that in addition to the market's response during the event window, that is during the day before, day after, and day including the announcement of the earnings news, the market price responds to that earnings news. That is, if it was a positive surprise, the market responds positively, and if it was a negative surprise, the market responds negatively. What we also learned that is new with our study is the market has a similar response to surprises in the sentiment conveyed in management's communications to the market. We find that during the event window. In the post-event window, what we find is that the price continues to drift up for positive surprises and drift down for negative surprises, which we've known for decades with respect to the hard earnings news. Now we're discovering that this is incrementally true for the soft earnings information as well.
So how much more new information does your study give investors? Because basically, traditionally, and many quantitative models, trading models are based on this, you can trade a stock based on what the numbers do compared to expectations. How much more information does the soft news give us in order to make trading decisions?
We can earn several additional risk-adjusted basis points based upon trading on the soft information, according to our hedge fund and hedge return analyses.
So what are you looking at specifically in the soft news? How do you break it down in order to get good signals?
So what we do is to run the 20,000 plus corporate earnings announcements through linguistic algorithms, and these algorithms process the text of the announcements and extract for us different linguistic characteristics. And one of the ones that we focus on is net optimism, which is the number of optimistic words minus the number of pessimistic words relative to the total words used in the earnings announcement. And what we find is that unexpected positivism connotes or precedes positive unexpected future price performance. And the same is true for net negativity or pessimism.
But it doesn't translate into the stock immediately.
Some of it is immediately impounded into price, but more of it is impounded later in the 60 days post-earnings announcement period. So it takes the market some time to fully digest the soft information that's being conveyed by management during their announcement.
So that's what you call net optimism. The other aspect of your study is certainty. What does certainty tell us as a factor in linguistic analysis?
So the certainty construct, the idea behind that one is to extract from the text document the extent to which management is assertive and forthright and unambiguous in their discourse. And so the reverse of that uncertainty would be that they're hedging or less precise in the way that they're in their choice of language use. And what we find with respect to the certainty construct is that it is related to the volatility in the firm's share price. Both during the event window, more hedging means a greater volatility in the share price, evidence that the market is also uncertain about the information being conveyed and how to process that into the price setting process. And it is also associated with the 60-day post-announcement volatility as well. So after controlling for all of the other known determinants of abnormal volatility, hedginess or uncertainty or lack of forthrightness in the manager's earnings announcement also translates into greater volatility in the aftermarket.
But why separate the two, net optimism and certainty? Shouldn't they just be showing basically the same thing, whether a company's positive or negative about its outlook?
No, not at all. They're different linguistic attributes. One is really about optimism and positivity. There are many different dictionary words that are associated with these constructs, but they're very much positive as opposed to negative. whereas certainty is really about forthrightness in speech, and it's a very different characteristic.
And so the results, when you check each of these two, net optimism or certainty, show completely different uncorrelated results in terms of the share price movement.
That's correct, and it's really the net optimism that is driving the returns dimension, whereas certainty is much more correlated with the volatility dimension of the stock price.
Everybody expects a CEO basically to pump up his share price with positive news. I mean, how can you check in your study for what we would call cheap talk or overly optimistic words that really don't mean anything? I mean, does this cheap talk have any effect?
So what we actually expected to find was that the market would discount much more heavily the soft information or the cheap talk that management was putting out. And in particular, we might have expected a firm with negative hard earnings information to talk up the possible future prospects of the stock, given that they've performed not so well this period. And we expected that the market would discount these sentimental characteristics. In fact, what we find is that the market seems to parse these things out well, and there are certainly different levels of impounding of this soft information in price depending upon firm characteristics, but by and large the evidence suggests that the market responds to it in the same direction in which the executives are conveying it.
So to be very precise, if you were to give an advice today to a CEO, it's always worth talking up your stock because the market systematically responds. The market isn't able to filter out the language.
I wouldn't go that far, and the reason for that is that what we do is on a firm-by-firm basis, we control for what the CEO has done in the past. So if the CEO's barometer on pessimism is 8 out of 10, or optimism, and they do a 9 this period, we didn't expect it to be that high. Something must have changed. There must be some good news coming, and that seems to be impounded into price. But if one CEO's barometer is on average 8 and another 6, then that person with the 8 doesn't necessarily get priced more. It's only when an unexpected amount of optimism in that executive's speech.
So your study can show change in optimism rather than benchmarking a very sales-savvy CEO versus somebody who's not very sales-savvy.
That's correct. That's correct.
You talk about different responses according to company types. You talk about, for example, whether a company has a lot of liquidity in the way the share is traded, or whether a company is even in the high-tech sector. Could you tell us about some of these differentiating factors?
So what we looked at was whether or not characteristics of the hard earnings information would impact the extent to which soft information is reflected in the share price. And we know, for example, that for high-tech companies, for companies with high PE multiples, with high market-to-book multiples that are R&D intensive, these are companies in categories where the traditional accounting earnings model does not convey well the underlying economics of the firm. And what we find for those firms is that, by and large, the soft information has a greater impact on the share price. And the reason for that is that the soft information appears to be filling a void where the hard earnings information fails to fully convey the economics.
So basically, here another piece of advice for CEOs that are in complicated, hard-to-measure businesses. They get a lot of added value or bang for their buck from explaining more rather than just hoping the market is going to understand their numbers.
Absolutely. The earnings numbers are not enough, and they need to supplement that.
You talk about analyst coverage. How does analyst coverage play into your study?
What we find is that firms that are more heavily covered by analysts have a greater impact of their soft information on their share price.
Which would seem logical.
It does seem logical, and some of the reasons that we suggest for this finding are that the analysts are essentially serving as a monitoring role. So this is a firm that's heavily covered by analysts. They are vetting the information being conveyed by management, and thus management is much more likely to convey more credible information, knowing that there is a monitoring mechanism at play, and the market responds accordingly to more strongly to that credible soft information relative to firms that are less heavily followed by analysts.
And finally, to validate this whole study, you've constructed model portfolios which show a certain amount of overperformance versus the traditional hard news quantitative portfolio. How would you recommend that investors who want to improve their quantitative models integrate this new soft information?
They can replicate exactly what we did and try to run with that in real time. So essentially what we do is create portfolios based upon the extent to which there is a positive versus negative surprise in the hard news. And we can find, as people have found for some years, a positive price performance. The price continues to drift up. If you add to that the surprise component of the soft information, you can earn still greater returns in those same high-end portfolios.
Liz Demers, Assistant Professor of Accounting and Control Area at INSEAD. Thank you very much.
Thank you.